Before I get started, I want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you for having me, but also I owe a huge debt of gratitude to these guys who are putting this event on. It takes a lot of work to do this kind of thing. There's translators and everything. If you want to talk about my personal user experience, it's been unbelievable. So if we could just give these guys a round of applause, they definitely deserve it. Like you said, this is my one shameless self-plug. I'm the UX director at Huge. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's how. Follow the company as well. If you want to get in touch, that's the easiest way to do it. At Huge, we help transform brands and grow businesses. And really, user experience is at the core of everything we do. I think it's important to say this up front because it is the thing that sort of differentiates us from other digital agencies. The presentation I'm going to give today is definitely more agency-centric, I think, than some others you might have seen. But I think it's important to say this because it's the kind of the stake in the ground that makes us different. And we're kind of in the middle of what I think is a revolution right now in the world of business in general, in that everything is becoming digital. Historically, you'll have like above-the-line agencies you go to for marketing and things like that, and you'll have a digital agency that you go to for, say, your website or your mobile app or something like that. In the future, I don't think that's going to exist. You're just going to go to an agency, and it's like digital's going to be expected. And one of the things that we do, we do our fair share of marketing campaigns and banner ads and things like that, but helping people solve problems and accomplish their goals is really at the core of our business, and it's the thing that's made us successful. Just to give you a sense of where we are, we're spread all over the world. We got 8 offices pretty much everywhere, and we're expanding all the time. We've been around about 15 years, 600 employees. Yeah, and there's a couple of ones that are ramping up that aren't listed here, but it's an exciting time. And we've been very fortunate. We've won some awards, and people seem to appreciate what we're doing, and we like doing it. So that's always positive. The thing that I'm here to talk about today, though, is process. And it's funny, like when our communications director came to me and asked me to come here and talk about process, I was like, why would you want me to do that? It's such a boring, like dreary subject of like the drudgery of like the process of doing things. But then I got to thinking about it, and I was like, actually, I do think there's something interesting to be said here. For years now, there's been a lot of talk about like the merits of, Agile versus waterfall, and now there's this whole lean UX thing, whatever that means. And even like earlier today, I was asked the question, do you think wireframes are dead, and is rapid prototyping now the way to do it? And I think all of these things, like there is no silver bullet, right? Like when I was young, I thought, if I could just figure out what the perfect process is, I'm going to be the best ever, and it'll help me create better stuff. But that's just not true. Like I think process is a game plan. It's not a formula. There's no recipe for good work. If there was, people would have figured it out a long time ago, and there'd be a whole lot of better work in the world, and there just isn't. So I just want to talk to, like, basically process is a tool, like any other tool. And just because new tools come along, it doesn't mean old tools are obsolete. Just because we have nail guns doesn't mean that hammers are now obsolete. Because you have to use the right tool for the right context. And if the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, every problem you encounter starts to look like a nail. And that's just not good. So this is, in a nutshell, the Huge process. Thank you very much. Anyway, this, like many slides I'm going to show you today, is a real slide. We show this to clients in our capabilities deck, and I think it's basically just how any problem is basically broken down. You have a discovery phase, a planning phase. There's the part where you create what you're going to do, implement it, measure it, and then start back over. To expand upon it a little more, you can read the bullets yourself. This is kind of all the different stuff that goes into it. And I'll dig into each of these in a little bit more detail in just a second. But I want to kind of put a finer point on it. I think this is basically the soul excuse me, of any creative process. It's about vision, execution, and feedback. Having a strong point of view about each of these things I think is really important. So I'm going to talk about vision first. I'm going to go through these things kind of quickly because it's a lot about research and stuff like that, and I think people in this room probably have a pretty good sense of what that means. So let's talk about strategy and vision. I have my cheat sheet on my phone here in case you wonder why I keep looking down at it. I'm not tweeting at the same time. So basically, like the caveat to all this is, if we had infinite time and infinite budget, we would do all of these things up front. But on some projects, like when we did CNN, for instance, everybody that worked on the project was already a user of CNN, so we kind of knew like what we were doing, and so like the designers and the UX people just could get started. For other things, if we're doing like financial services stuff or something like that, like I don't know how to manage my bank account, let alone like assets and all that kind of stuff. So it takes a lot more research to gain an insight and have a strong point of view. So I'm going to walk through kind of like each of the things we do in research and discovery and talk a little bit about each of them. The first thing we always do, and I don't think you can get away with not doing this, is stakeholder interviews. This is pretty standard. It's like going and having a conversation with the client. But there's something interesting to be said here, and this is the one that I'll dwell on for a moment. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that a lot of times when you talk to creatives, they have this attitude that the client is the enemy, like you're trying to fight them to get your idea through and to like realize your perfect, wonderful vision. And that is a really, really poisonous attitude. And I hate when I run into people that have that attitude because it ruins the work, honestly, and it ruins the relationship. And so stakeholder interviews are that first opportunity you have to ally yourself with your client and basically, make your goals their goals and show them that you're on their side and that we're all in this together and it's a collaborative effort. You'd be really, really surprised like how much better that makes work. Just basically being friends with the client, like especially as a UX person, if you think about it, we have a unique role in creative projects, especially in the agency world, in that you're there for the stakeholder interview, but you're there all the way until the development happens and the thing gets launched and you start looking at how it's doing. In terms of creative roles, like no one else really does that. There might be an account manager or a product manager on the project all the way through the end, but they're really like, they should be the bad guy. You should be the good guy. You should be the guy that the client comes to and is like, this is the person who's going to help me realize my creative vision. Developers tend to roll on and roll off. Visual designers tend to roll on and roll off. Strategy people, user experience researchers, that kind of thing. UX is the role that is really there from start to finish. And so if I can leave you with one thing, it's like be nice to people. You'd be surprised how much it improves the work that you end up doing. Next thing we kind of do whenever we do a new project is an organizational review. This is, you can read what it is, but I think that the key thing here is understanding internal processes. This is something that took me a long time to realize. You have a tendency, especially from the agency side, I'll just come right out and say it, like people that work at agencies tend to be arrogant when they come into clients and be like, oh, I'm going to give them this awesome, awesome thing. And then they wonder why it comes out bad at the end. And one of the reasons is because you did something that they can't support with their team and what their team's capabilities are. So, understanding the organization and what people's responsibilities are, but then also what they are physically capable of with the manpower and the man hours they have is critically important to informing the work that you're going to do. Market analysis, really the key takeaway here is just understanding what makes the brand that you're working for unique and how they can execute against that to be successful. It's kind of like one of the sort of really hard things to nail, but once you do it, it really does it gives you a point of view and a direction that you might not otherwise have. Content strategy, this is basically figuring out what's there, what exists, what gaps are there, and then how are we going to make this better. Before I move on, I think content strategy too, it's very obvious if you're working for editorial stuff, if you're doing like a news site or a blog or something like that, but I would say that there's also a content strategy to be talked about in e-commerce as well, or even in like hospitality especially. But there's one thing that I worked at Amazon years ago, and one of my biggest gripes about it was that you don't get that sense of being in a store. When you walk into a store, there's this whole experience that's kind of ethereal that you have. You walk through, you're looking at things on the aisle. It's sort of serendipitous, and they create these little vignettes of things that you can look at, and it's very curated. E-commerce on the web today is very boring. It's very like static and not very good. And so, telling a story through e-commerce is something that I think all of us should strive to do whenever we get the chance to do it. I think there's a lot of growth to be done there. A lot of people copy Amazon, but I can tell you from being there, like. They don't try things that are like wildly different from what they've done already, and there is an opportunity for somebody somewhere to go out there and do that and really redefine what e-commerce is. Technology assessment. This kind of goes hand in hand with that thing about roles and responsibilities, understanding what the technical constraints are around what you're doing, so that you can, when you're actually in the middle of designing something sort of in the abstract, you know whether or not it's actually realistic to implement. Product and service research, this is kind of standard stuff. Audience and user research, you talk to the people who are actually using the thing. That might give you a pretty good idea of what you need to do. Personas, I think personas are important, but I'm actually not a big fan of them. That's not to say you should never do them, because I would never say that, but I feel like a lot of times people will do personas just for the sake of doing them and won't really put a lot of thought into it. Personas are really, really good if you have especially a business client that is business-minded. Like I'll say, okay, let's say Catherine, regardless of what it says here, say Catherine is a mom who is just trying to get a subscription for diapers every week. She's a mom with a kid. If you're talking to a business guy who's in the business of providing diapers to Catherine, his goals are going to be around procurement and analytics and money and all that kind of thing. And he might not really have that sort of key insight of what is this woman looking for when she just wants to get the diapers. She's got 1,000 other things going on. Like she needs a service provided, and you need to be empathetic towards that. And I think personas are a great way to get business people to show the empathy that I think UX people tend to have very naturally. Following directly onto this is scenarios. So, putting that person in a context that is easy for others to understand. This all basically gives everybody a point of reference when you're in the middle of you tend to get into these academic conversations about whether or not you should do thing X, and walking back and saying listen, in this person in this scenario, would they actually need this or not? Are we wasting a bunch of time on this topic that we don't need to waste? I think that's what these are good for. The last thing about working at an agency in terms of the discovery process is this, and this is really key, and I think it's actually the thing that an agency can provide that you don't really get in-house, and that's just sort of institutional knowledge. When I come to a new project, not me personally, because I didn't work on every single one of these, but our agency did. And so when we come to a new project, we also bring with us the experience of every other project we've ever worked on. So if I'm working on a content project, I'm applying things that I learned in e-commerce and applying things that I learned from other people in other industries that are really, really smart. When you talk to people who run businesses every day, you tend to learn some things that you probably wouldn't have learned otherwise, and it's a really great opportunity. This is also kind of the one point where I would say, for a young UX person starting out, or a young designer starting out in general, if I had one thing that I made the mistake of when I was first getting out of college, was I went and worked at Microsoft right away, and I went in-house, and I worked there for 5 years, and I realized very quickly that I was getting pigeonholed. If I had it to do over again, I would have gone into an agency first, because you end up working on a lot of different kinds of projects. You work with a lot of different people, and you get a lot of different challenges that it really gives you a broader perspective and makes you think about things in a much different way. And often you can apply abstract concepts from one thing to another that you won't really get from working in a silo on one thing very hard. I would say too, though, going back to that stakeholder interview point, when you walk into a client, you should basically go there with that whole thing of the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing, because there's no way you can ever possibly know more about a business than the people who do it every single day. So there is a trade-off there, but that's my point. To bring this all together, basically at the end of our sort of discovery phase, we wrap everything up into a strategic vision, and the point of this is basically to have it's basically the gut check before we actually get into real hashing through designs and page layouts and things like that. It's basically to get everybody aligned to say, hey, are we on the right track? Is this kind of what we're seeing? Here's what we discovered out of discovery. Here's kind of what we're thinking about the concept that we want to do. Here's where we're going. And what we try to do is encapsulate it all in the green slide. And the green slide basically comes down to this. It's the product vision. And it should be one sentence that you can describe the entire product with very, very simply. If you can't do this, you have more work to do. It's that thing that if someone walks up to you on the street and says hey, what's that thing you're working on? You should be able to say in one sentence oh, we're doing this. And I have some examples here for you. Itaú, this is a bank in Brazil, and the key insight from research was that everybody kind of has the same goal. They want to become more active and with less effort. Everybody wants to be good at managing their money. Everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to have their money make money for them. So the key insight here was this is it. We just need to help users to become more active with less effort. All that other stuff is important too, but primarily this is what we're here to do. HBO Go. I feel like I put this up and it looks silly, but it's true. It's you're there to watch video, right? And when you get into the navel gazing, self-reflection of the middle of a project, and you're like, oh well, where's that promotion link gonna go? It's important to come back and be like, dude, people don't care about that. They just want to watch videos. Like, this is what we need to be doing. Pepsi, we did the refresh project years ago. They basically took all of their, I don't know if you guys know about this, they basically took all of their ad dollars for the Super Bowl a few years ago and put it into this project. And the whole idea was basically people could create ideas and then vote and share them. And that was the whole point of the entire product, was just get people to share ideas and get people to vote on them. The ones that had that won in their particular categories, Pepsi would basically fund the project. And it was all based on local community stuff. And it was really, really cool, and it was really, really successful. But having this clear of a vision of what we were doing was really important to making that happen. NAR is the National Association of Realtors in the U.S. and basically what we want to do is mint for homeowners. Like, how do you make your home more valuable over time, and what steps do you need to take to do that, and then what are the things that you're doing that might be detrimental to it. The last one that I'll show here is News Pulse from CNN, and this was basically iTunes for news. It was a new take on what a news site could do, and this is kind of what we're driving towards. So anyway, coming out of all of this, you get to execution, and this is the part where this is the thing that I think is really important to take away from today. Like all that upfront stuff, you can do more or less of it if you want to, but like execution and the way that you approach it is really the key to any creative process. The other thing that I'll caveat this with before I start is that we might do this in parallel with discovery, depending. Like I gave you the CNN example a second ago. There's sometimes where you have to have a UI first approach. There's this quote that kind of goes around the office often where you don't know what you're doing until you're actually doing it. Sometimes just sitting down and hashing through things actually brings you to like new realizations. And there's something to be said for just getting your hands dirty, like throwing away all the research and don't look through reams and reams of paper. Just sit down and start playing with stuff and see what works and see what doesn't, and get in there a little bit. I think this kind of goes back to that idea of rapid prototyping. And as I go through these execution things, I hope that you can kind of see a little bit of what I mean when I say everything is just a tool, because whenever we do projects at Huge, like there's an aspect of Agile to it, there's an aspect of rapid prototyping to it, and then there's a place where waterfall comes into it as well. Overall, I think that nuance is a lot better than slogans or hyperbole or being a zealot about one thing or another. Nuance will always win. It might be harder to explain, but if you have a more sophisticated, nuanced point of view, you're going to be ahead of the game in terms of your competition. When it comes to execution, I think there's basically five steps: focus, collaboration, leadership, endurance, and prototypes. And we'll talk about focus for a second. The first thing you need to ask yourself when you start, and this goes back to that product vision thing, is what are the 2 or 3 things that actually matter? Like a lot of times you'll be working on a project and it doesn't matter what the contact page looks like necessarily. 80% of the time that you work on a project should be spent on the 2 or 3 things that actually matter to users. A really good example of this is we're in the midst of redesigning TED.com right now, and the team that's working on it spent 6 weeks just on the video page, on like the video landing page, because that's basically all anybody cares about on the site. It's the page that people spend the most time on. It's the page people share. It's the page people engage with the most. And so splitting things up evenly amongst all the pages makes no sense. Like you should really, really nail the things that are important, because at the end of the day, you want to be like the best at that thing that you're designing for. You want to do it in a way that has never been done before and blows away the competition. And I think naturally designers are competitive, and I think that competitive spirit is healthy. You want to always try to be better than the next guy. It's the thing that's going to define you, and it's the thing that will make you better, is always having that hunger to move forward. A couple of examples of these things. JetBlue. This is a really old example now, actually. I think we did this in 2005. And the key thing that we did differently was this. It's the booker on the homepage. It seems really obvious now because everyone does it. But at the time, airline websites, they all looked the same. They had a bunch of promos on the homepage. They didn't really say much. It was all about oh, come join our airline. It's great. And then we looked at the analytics and we're like, everyone's just clicking on that book a ticket link in the upper right-hand corner. Why don't we just put the booker on the homepage? And they're like, oh, that's such a such an amazing idea. How'd you ever think of that? I was like, well, we fucking looked at the analytics, dude. Are you kidding me? The next example is the Four Seasons website we worked on. I also put this in here because I did it, but whatever. The thing is, so obviously there's a booker on the homepage, important. But the thing that we noticed when we did both usability studies and when we did looked at the analytics is people only care about photos. The first thing people go to all the time is photography. So the first thing we did was we made the homepage basically a big slideshow. And then the one thing that we really keyed into quickly was the slideshow page and what the like big slide presentation looked like. And this is an example of where like I did not wireframe this page. I sat down with a piece of paper, scribbled down what I thought would work, showed it to the guy sitting next to me. He told me I was crazy. I was like, okay, then I guess I'm on the right track. And then I basically just started prototyping. And the first prototype of this, I would show it to you, but I have no idea where it is. It is the ugliest thing you've ever seen. It's just gray boxes that sort of scroll around and work a little bit. But the end result, I think, is really awesome. And I'll talk you through a couple of little things that I think are really cool about this. Number one, like if I click here, one of the things that has bugged me forever when people go to like these big slide presentations is that I have to scroll my mouse. If I clicked here, I have to scroll all the way up to the edge of my browser to close it again, or I have to scroll all the way over here to like move to the next photo. So the thing that I was thinking is like, what if we just popped up this semi-transparent controller in the middle? It pops up right underneath your mouse where you clicked, and then you can just click again to close it. You can move your hand, a centimeter to the right, and you can just start tabbing through. And then the other thing too is like this down here works the same way. If I click this, the whole timeline moves over so that the next one is underneath my mouse. I think UX, really, it's about facilitating laziness. You want to help people be lazier so they can consume things faster. I am the laziest person on earth, so it kind of helps to inform a lot of the decisions that I make in this kind of stuff. The next bit I want to talk about is collaboration. Collaboration is really important, and this it puts a real sort of focus on that competitive idea. This is like an average project team at Huge. But if you look at how this team's made up, you might have a project manager that's like a motion guy, there's a product strategist, and then there's a handful of VD and UX people. At the beginning of projects, the way that it's traditionally done, or everywhere that I've ever worked, you have the UX people start first, And if you're breaking up things, say say it's a content website, you're going to be like, okay, you're going to work on the homepage, you're going to work on the category page, and you're going to work on the article page. And the reason that is traditionally done is because people don't like arguing with each other. They don't like competition. You don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations where like, yeah, yours is better than mine, but I'm not going to admit that, so I'm going to argue with you over it, What we like to do is this. It's basically to say everybody crashes on the same thing at once to basically get everybody's perspective on things. So even like the project manager, it's like, sure, bring sketches. We don't care. Like it's all about generating ideas and hashing through things really quickly and getting everybody's perspective. Because at the end of the day, our genius mathematical theorem is that 8 is greater than 1. If you have 8 people thinking about a problem all at once, you're probably going to be able to generate a lot more ideas and a lot more good ideas than if you just have one person sitting in a vacuum, like pointing their mouse at things. And the great thing about it is you can basically all jump into a room, hash things through, and say like, oh, this is good on yours, this is good on yours, this is good on yours. Let's put these things together and see what happens when we do that. And it basically like this also kind of does another thing that I think is really awesome, which is 1 meeting a day. It's kind of is a little bit of the agile concept, right? Like just basically everybody meets in the morning, you show your work. You have 10 fights a day, but that's good because it basically gets all the cards on the table and it makes you a lot more honest about your work. There's something that I say to everybody, like every junior designer that comes and ends up on one of my teams, like the first piece of advice I always have to give is don't be precious about your work. You don't gain anything from that. If you can't take feedback from the people that you work with every day, who are your friends and you have to look at in the face all the time, there's no way you're going to survive when you put stuff on the web or in the app store or anywhere else, because people are vicious. They will tear you apart on Twitter. They'll put horrible comments in YouTube videos. They'll tear you apart on message boards. The internet is the most open forum for the loudest complainers, and no one's ever going to write you a letter to say, hey man, great job, but they will write you a letter to say like, you're a dick and I hate you and everything you've done is awful, you should die. Like I've had that happen quite a few times. Die in a fire. I have a very thick skin these days. But the thing is, one of the keys to this is basically the third thing, leadership. Having someone that you can look to that's in the room and basically can make the final call that everyone respects is really, really important. And that's why it's very important at Huge that we lead by example. At the end of the day, the most important thing and the only thing that keeps us in business is craft, and having a very, very serious commitment to craft all the time. I'll show you this. Like, this is Joe. He's the global executive creative director, and most days of the week you can find him just like this, sitting at his computer in Photoshop, like actually designing things. I think a lot of times as you become more senior, I've found this myself actually, is you get removed more and more from the work, and you start delegating things and just telling people what to do, or you come to things like this and just talk about work. That makes you worse. You know, like I would say, this kind of goes back to that thing of one meeting a day, you always have to keep working. And it comes, I mean, it's basically as simple as doing is better than talking. You know, I've had jobs where a lot of my job was doing dumb stuff related to design that wasn't still design, and I could feel my skills rusting. And then when I went back to try to do the things I used to be really good at, I found I wasn't good at them anymore. And not only that, but the industry had evolved, and there was new things I needed to get good at, but I was starting back from 3 steps before where I was, you know, in the past. It's really, really important, I think, especially in this industry, in the industry of digital, to constantly be working. Because if you don't, the world will pass you by, and you'll be a relic, and you know, you can be like, oh, I remember back when I did this one thing a long time ago that was great, and people will be like, yeah, that's cool, but we're on to the next thing now. A great example of this, and I'm just going to show this. Have you guys seen this documentary? It's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. When it was made, he was like 85 years old. He's probably older than that now, but I just want to show you a little video clip. I might tear up during it because I love this, but here we go.
いいネタを入れていい仕事をするのが職人で、あと儲かろうが儲からないがあんまりそれは気にしない。で自分たちでも例えばお寿司を作ってやってる、だけどまだあるんだろうまだあるんだろうって上を見るわけでしょ。ということはまだ上に何かがあるっていうこと、そこまで頂上まで行けば完璧かも分かんないけど、じゃあこの頂上はどこかっていうと分かんないわけですよ。仕事しててこの年になって完璧だとは思っていないからね。それは気分いいですよ。一日中ほんわかで握ってられるし、職人根性でしょうねこれは。それをやめる、その自分が一生懸命でやってるところをやめる。水商売が嫌だななんて思ったこと一回もないです。ただこれをもう惚れて一生懸命でこれをやって少しでも上っていうふうに考えて現在まで来ています。だから今85になってもさあ今やめようかという気はあまりありません。そういうことです。